Welcome back, listeners, to a new episode of the New Standard. And we have longtime friend of the program on, my salary cap sensei himself, Ian Whetstone. What's up, Big Ian?
How's it going, man?
It's good to see you. We haven't had Ian on the show for a while. Before we hop into it, Ian, why don't you give people just a little bit of background in the work you've done with the cap and your
Sure,
relationship with some media stuff around Pittsburgh.
sure. I got interested in cap stuff uh, 2 decades ago at this point. When I was in college, I saw an absence of quality information about it, and I thought if no one can tell me, if no one can give me good answers about this kind of stuff, I'll just learn it myself. That's what I did. There's a lot more decent resources for it now than there were at the time. But it just was a hobby to keep me busy, and for a long time I was writing off and on for Jim Wexell's site at Steel City Insider. Um, and mostly now I just will pop up with social media, Twitter and other places, and offer
I'm,
some
I'm
minor.
just going to say this. I'm going to say this, Ian.
Mhm.
For people, I know people in the community are familiar with you, but I'm just going to say you've been my salary cap sensei. You've taught me a ton about the cap. And if you don't know Ian's work, Ian is the equivalent of, in my opinion, Ian's been over the cap before over the cap. Now a lot of people look at over the cap, sports track, but I think you were the original over the cap.
For the Steelers, I know Jason who runs over the cap reasonably well. He's excellent. I mean, the volume of information that he maintains is
Yes.
quite incredible. The availability of that site means that I don't do all the number crunching that I used to. It's duplicate effort. There's no particular need for it. Um, but it's a very handy resource for me. It's the resource that I would recommend for anyone who's interested in reliable information on it. The thing about Jason is that not only does he make that information available, but he really understands it. Um, so he's not gonna get stuck putting bad information up because he just didn't understand what he was doing.
Right, right. And, I am just a pupil. He is you handed you gave him the keys to the dojo. He is, he is salary cap kung fu, Wetson style kung fu numbers. He is the true master. I am just the pupil. But let's jump into real quick the Steelers cap status. It was reported last week that the cap, I think, jumped 30 some odd million. As a result, I think the Steelers went from a situation where they would have been over to now they're under and they have a little space. Why don't you break that down for the listeners? Just the impact of the cap jump, your thoughts about the cap jump, and just where that sets the Steelers up.
Yeah, I mean, for starters, it's a big jump. I mean, it was bigger than expected. As far as I can think, it's an unprecedented jump, at least without like in 2006 there was a really large jump because there was a renegotiation of the collective bargaining agreement, and it changed the way that the calculation was done, and so that changed dramatically. Um, and then I think the second year after COVID there was a big jump because revenue had been depressed from
Right.
COVID, and when it caught back up again, there was a big jump. But without some kind of like artificial mechanism to force an increase like that, this is, as far as I can think, the largest year-to-year percent increase that we've ever seen, um, which bodes well for the league's future. I mean, if revenues are just sort of kicking into higher gear in that way, we're likely to see, if maybe not this dramatic an increase from year to year, we're likely to see a return to the reliable, sizable increases year to year. Um, which for the Steelers, I mean, the thing is that, like, fans of every team look at that and say, "Oh, that's great! Now they can do all these things." But every team enjoys that same benefit. Really, the teams that are probably helped the most are the ones that were the tightest, just in it alleviates the immediate pressure. The Steelers are kind of in the middle. They're not looking at a ton of cap space. They weren't in like a New Orleans style dilemma either. But it certainly helps. I think for them, I think it takes some of the decisions that they maybe would have to make right away and gives them some breathing room to like sit on some of those a little bit. Maybe there's a guy or two on the roster that they would have had to think about making a move on sooner, that now maybe they can look to the draft and see what happens in the draft before they make those kind of moves. Um, I never with the Steelers expect them to go after the largest free agents, when free agency opens. They've been more active in free agency the last 5-6 years than they had been for a long time. But they're still not dipping into like, that top tier of expensive guys. And I think that's with good reason. I mean, those guys cost a lot. And when we see a giant sort of unexpected jump in the cap like this, those are the guys who are going to reap
Right.
that windfall the most, or the most coveted free agents. Teams that were going to throw money at them are going to throw more money at them. I think every free agent's expectations just jumped whatever percent the cap just jumped.
Right.
I don't know that they'll all. I think a lot more free agents think that they're the top tier than actually are. But there's always guys who you don't expect, to get big paydays who do. So a lot of the guys who people might covet, their prices are really going to go through the roof.
Now, you talked about in your answer about the impact on the Steelers roster and this jump in the cap, giving them ability to put some decisions on the back burner. What do you think? We've seen Mason Cole get cut. We've seen Chuck Okorafor get cut.
Mhm.
In terms of their books and the players on their books, what are those decisions you're thinking about that they're able to delay because of this jump?
Yeah, I mean, like I think if they needed immediate space, like we'd have already seen something with Allen Robinson. Like, there's no way they're keeping Allen Robinson at the number that he's at right now. Is set to earn 10 million. His cap number is about 12 million. You're not going to pay somebody for that role for that kind of production $10 million. There's no way. But but they can maybe think about. They can talk to him like, hey, do you want to come back? What's the price? Is it something we can work on? Whereas before it would have been like, we got to cut him loose now. I think the fact that they're not in a big press, that's interesting. You can kind of read into if they cut someone like Cole. Like, Cole did not make a ton of money. I think he was slated to make
Yeah.
5 million or so this year. His cap number was higher, but he was going to make about 5 million. So that was a player decision. That wasn't a cap
Right.
decision. Like, that means that they're looking at that position and they think they can do better. And they're not particularly concerned about having him as a fallback in that way. Allen Robinson is I think the big, like the really obvious move yet to come. Like something's going to happen with him at that number. There are guys who it'll be interesting to see what they do. Like I think there's going to be talk about Cam Heyward's number. Cam Heyward's a great player. He's been a great player for the Steelers. I think he's the heart and soul of the team. He's coming off the Walter Payton Award. I don't see the Steelers having interest in moving on from him. I don't think they should. I don't really think roster-wise they're in a position to either.
Yeah, I agree.
He's got a big cap number. It's the second largest cap number on the team. He's slated to make 16 million this year. His cap number is I think up around 22 million, which is a big number. Although it's not like I don't. He's not. This past year he wasn't at his peak, but he's a good player. And interior defensive linemen are commanding huge dollars. Like if you want to go out and get a top 10 interior defensive lineman, you're going to be paying $25 million a year. Like, it's big money. So I don't think it's an outlandish price to pay for someone who is still a pretty good player. And you don't necessarily just have someone waiting in the wings to step in for, and for leadership and all that kind of thing. But I wouldn't be surprised if they do something with that number in some way. I don't really think they can go to him and seek a pay cut. I don't know that they want to do that just in terms of the relationship, not just with him, but with other players in that locker room. But if you want to bring that number down, a thing that they've done in the past is like to do a pseudo extension. Like, I don't think you're going to do like a real extension with a player at that age, but you might do something where you pay him the same cash this year, you add some years, and they're not dummy years necessarily. He could play at those years, but they're not, they're the years that if after this year that's it, he can go free. They can mutually part ways, and there's some dead money, but it's not it's not this onerous situation for anyone. I could see them doing something like a cosmetic extension to lessen that cap hit and spread it out a little bit.
I agree. I think given his stature in the organization, his stature as a player, his stature in the organization, what he means to the city, and he is synonymous, I think, him and TJ Watt with the brand, that I think all of that weighs into they'll do something for him. They'll figure something out. And he's been a solid citizen. I mean, this is the type of guy I think you absolutely want to reward. But let's jump into, and listeners, you're checking out the new standard salary cap 101 with Ian Whetstone, friend of the program. A lot of talk in the media about let Russ cook. A lot of talk about Russell Wilson and his contract situation. Briefly break that down, and what would the Steelers do? What would the Steelers have to do to acquire him? And if the Steelers did acquire him, what do you think the turn of events would be?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question. It's a team looking to make that move. In the short term, you're not necessarily taking on a problem in terms of the immediate money that you would owe, because a lot of the money that his big cap number with Denver is going to stay with Denver for this year, but he does have big cash numbers that kick in after this year, and there's some guarantees on those. So like, it's not, if you're taking on Russell Wilson, you're looking at least a 2 year, a 2 year expectation that you're going to hang on to him for that, and you could move that money around. But I don't know. That to me, that's a move for a team that really feels a quarterback away and really has confidence. That really thinks that they got a good shot at like doing something like the Rams did a few years ago when they brought in
Stafford, yeah.
Stafford, and you think it's that kind of situation. But obviously, the on-field situation with Wilson has been kind of murky the last couple of years. I think he's played reasonably well, but obviously, that relationship in Denver soured. I don't know. It seems messy to take that on. I, it's not impossible. What does Denver want for him? If that relationship is that sour, then they want to unload him. They don't want to have to pay him the money that they owe him.
Do you think they cut him,
I,
or
if they don't, with his, I don't see him playing for them, right?
right?
So if there's either a trade market has to materialize, or they have to cut him, I guess. Like, I don't think. They can't have him sitting around and not start him. But if they did cut him with the guarantees that they owe him still, any team that he's going to sign for probably gets him quite cheap, because of the way that the offsets work. Like, no one's going to pay him more than Denver was going to pay him, I wouldn't think. And Denver has to cut Denver. Anything that another team pays him that's less than what Denver pays him, Denver just pays him the difference. So there's not a lot of incentive for him to try to max out what he can get unless it's more than what Denver is going to pay him. He could be potentially a bargain for someone if he gets cut. But if he gets cut, that also means he has his pick of any kind of suitors.
Right, right.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm generally wary of trying to bring in like veteran quarterbacks like that and hoping that it works out. It just doesn't very often. I know it worked out with Stafford. It's hard to find other examples. Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning went to Denver, and that worked out.
Given the Steelers' history, I don't think it'll happen, given where he is also as a player. Let's say the Steelers, the light flashes or something,
Yeah.
and they make the decision to do this. What would his cap charge look like?
Sure. Well, so if they just took him on as is, like if they just did a straight trade of some kind and took him on, they'd be looking at, I think, $17 million for this year. That's the cash that he's owed this year, and it's in a straight salary. I think there's some option bonus too, so maybe more than that, maybe 20 or low 20s, which for quarterback is not a big number.
Right, it's less than
now
the
they
cap
could
is.
restructure that to make it lower,
Right?
and you're pushing out more of that money, further. I think that some portion of his 2025 is guaranteed. So a team would be on the hook for that too if they took him on. Again, I think you're looking at 2 years. 2 years of a 36-year-old quarterback. And where if you want him and you want that number to be kind of cheap in a trade situation, you're talking about pushing out money beyond those 2 years. And it's with what quarterbacks make, like it's big money that you're kind of making dead. You look at like the situation that Dallas is in with Dak, and they kind of have to extend him because they can't let him get to the end of that contract and dump this like giant wad of dead money that then they're trying to rebuild. With their next quarterback with this giant anchor that they're dealing with. I don't know that if I wouldn't, as any team, really want to do that with a quarterback position if I wasn't really confident in the player. Now that's the thing, right? So I don't know. Maybe in that building, maybe they love someone like Russell Wilson. Maybe they love someone like Justin Fields. I don't.
That's the thing. That's the thing that I always try to make a point to say when talking about the cap, that the cap is the cap. It's football. I mean, the cap doesn't play football. The guy that you acquire has to play football. How do they feel about him as a football player? And that leads to and by the way, let me give you props. And listeners, you're checking out the new standard salary cap 101 with Ian Whetstone. I love the Run the Jewels background. I love the Run the Jewels background.
Thank you. A buddy of mine had asked me to duplicate their first album cover, which I did. And like halfway through it, I was like, I did it in the style that it's done in. Halfway through it, I was like, what if I painted this in my style? What would that look like? And that's what's behind me now. I just kind of did that for kicks.
Yeah. So kudos to you for the Run the Jewels, to you and your friend. And again, you're listening to the new standard salary cap 101 with Ian Whetstone. Last question, Ian. Mm-hmm. Another quarterback that has popped up in the merry-go-round of quarterback names, because every quarterback obviously is coming to Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh doesn't have a quarterback. So every quarterback you can name is coming to Pittsburgh, and that's Justin Fields. What would a contract, in your opinion, look like, and how would that whole transaction work out for the Steelers? It's a trade, obviously, but kind of what does it look like from a cap perspective?
Like if you just traded for him, and then extended him.
Yeah, and extended him. Yes.
So I mean, that's the thing. Like if someone that young, if you're trading for him and you're trading what it would presumably take to get him, are you looking to extend him at that point? I mean, if you don't extend him, then and then he succeeds, then you're looking at you got to re-sign him anyway. The problem is that like the way the quarterback money is, like there's no affordable quarterback pricing right now. You know what I mean? Like when you're looking at Daniel Jones commanding $40 million a year, that seemed insane, and it doesn't look any better with a year's hindsight on it. The closest to like a kind of a bargain quarterback, marginally successful quarterback we've seen is was in Seattle.
Geno.
Yeah, I'm thinking the guy who Ike Taylor nailed. And I think he signed for like $75 million a year plus, or sorry, $25 million a year, 75 over 3 plus incentives. But that was only because he had to go 10 years without success to be like kind of a bargain when he hit it a little bit.
Wow, that's a great point.
Any young guy who you believe in enough to like acquire, if you tell them, if you go to his agent and say, okay, well, we want to extend this guy, that agent has no reason to take less than that kind of $40 million a year ballpark, and especially with the cap exploding like this. And if and contracts are getting shorter and shorter for good reason. Agents don't want to lock their guys into numbers for a long time. They want more frequent bites at the apple to be able to get whatever the cap increase is. They want to get new deals with that. And that's just kind of the way it is now. But like that's another thing. I just look at the history of acquiring quarterbacks from other teams, and just like far and away, like you look at the best quarterbacks in the league, and far and away, most of them are acquired they're just drafted.
They're drafted,
and they work out. Yeah. Like and there's plenty of guys who are drafted and don't work out. It doesn't mean drafting is a foolproof answer. It's just it is easily the most common way to acquire a franchise quarterback.
Let's end it with this. Give me 5 being it happens.
Mhm.
You think it guaranteed happens. 1 being absolutely not. So in terms of the 2 deals we talked about, in terms of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, 1 through 5, what do you think happens in both of those situations? How would you rank them? Likely, sort of likely, no way?
I would probably go 2 on each of them, with Fields being the more likely, just because I think he tracks more closely to a guy that you think, okay, maybe we can win with him and build with him, whereas he's not like a stopgap kind of guy. If he would pan out, I think overwhelmingly the most likely starting quarterback for the Steelers next year is Kenny Pickett. You know,
I agree.
so if you combine them, maybe 2.25, one or the other.
Yeah, I think just in hearing the tea leaves, and thank you for hopping on, especially last minute. It's awesome. I think Kenny Pickett's the guy. You see the numbers, and I thought you made a great point when you said it took Geno 10 years to become cheap.
That's right, right?
And
And
when you
even at that, like when I say that it's cheap, he made more this past year than the 10 years of his career combined. Like,
yes.
quarterbacks, if you're expected to be a starting quarterback and you're being signed, they are expensive. They just are.
Yes, they are apps. Yes. It's if you're walking to go get a Bentley, you're paying a bunch of money.
Yeah, yeah,
Don't even complain about it. That's why, and you make a great point there. That's why I see the Steelers are going to try to build out their roster, and with Kenny Pickett on that rookie contract, whether he succeeds or not,
yeah.
they're going to build out that roster while they have cost controls at the quarterback position.
Yeah, unless you have a high degree of confidence in the move that you're going to make, I think that the benefit to the rest of the roster of having that low cost at quarterback is greater than what you gain by what you would have to spend to get a marginally better quarterback.
Well, Ian, I want to thank you for hopping on the program, man. Thank you for hopping on last minute. And the run to Jules is epic. Is absolutely epic. Ian, thank you for hopping onto the program again. You're checking out Ian Whetstone, my cap sensei. Awesome when it comes to this stuff and these numbers. Thank you, everybody, for participating in the program. Please like and subscribe, and we're going to keep bringing you content. Thank you, Ian.